Sure.
Hi, we're very excited to welcome our special guest for today's episode, Kyle Thompson with TrueDoor Property Management. How's it going today, Kyle?
Good. Thanks, Scott. Thanks for inviting me. Appreciate it.
Good. I appreciate you coming on. So I just wanted to start out with, if you can just tell us a little bit about your company, your name, what you've been doing, and how long you've been in the business and what areas you service.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Kyle Thompson. I am a co-owner. There's two of us who are owners of TrueDoor Property Management. And we are located in Orange County. Our office is in Huntington Beach, but we manage properties all over Orange County, primarily residential and mostly homes, condos, and typically smaller apartment buildings. Typically under 50 units is what we like to specialize in.
Good. Yeah, we were talking briefly before before we hit record on this, and I'd recognized the name and the company had changed a little bit, but when I would say it's probably 3 or 4 years now, was actually a client or a tenant, I guess you would call it a tenant. And so they do a good job. They were under a different company's name at the time, but they did a really good job. So
yeah, we were previously known as Real Property Management and then Irvine Property Management. And we combined just recently into a new name, TrueDoor Property Management, but it's the same people. And, I'm glad to hear your experience was okay. And, hopefully you were treated well. That we try to treat our residents as well as we can, as well as our property, our clients will kind of, let us do that. Sometimes they put some handcuffs on what we're able to do for the tenants because we don't own the properties, but we try to make a big point of treating residents well. It's important.
the process was really easy because I remember I found it. I think I found the place online. There was a place that you could go. It was like something you could log in, get the lockbox code, and I was able to go view. Do you guys still have that process in place?
Yeah. So we're really big on what we call self-show technology. It's great for us, but it's also great for, potential residents because, if you're a potential resident and you're looking for a place to rent, trying to schedule a time with a person for that person to drive over to open the door and show you a home or a condo, an individual unit. Because typically, they're not on site because the properties that we manage are homes and condos. They're not like these huge complexes. So instead of having to organize a meeting between two people, which can be very difficult, we have a self-showing technology where we can do some verification of the person, of the potential resident or the potential applicant, I should say. And then we can give them electronic access to the property so they can go show themselves. And so, we still do that. We're big believers in that. And actually, we're doing something pretty cool that just recently started doing virtual 360 tours as well. So now we have some people who don't even go to the property. I think that's kind of crazy personally. Like, it makes me feel a little uncomfortable if they haven't seen it, but some people, they just do the virtual tour online and then they're like, I want it. So to each their
Is
own.
it Matterport that you're using for that?
Yeah, we use the Matterport for those. Have you guys had some experience with the Matterport?
The guy that I interviewed a couple of days ago, he uses Matterport. He's a photographer.
Oh yeah.
My company actually bought a camera when Matterport first came out.
Mhm.
We thought that, wow, we'll use this as a technology that we can possibly offer realtors. The problem was it was very early on. And at the same time, they didn't really need to. I mean, I think pricing was kind of an issue. I don't want to say an issue, but we just didn't know where the pricing would be at.
I know exactly what you're talking about, man. We were early adopter too, and and their model of pricing was kind of all over the place, right, at the beginning.
Well, the cameras are expensive. And then at the same time, as a business, we charge a certain fee for a home inspection. And it's like, why would I go do photography and do this Matterport for $250 when I can use that spot for a home inspection for $500? And it just got to the point to where realtors were not really ready for the technology. I don't know if they weren't ready for it. They just didn't want to have to pay for it. Houses were selling without it.
Yeah.
So there was just a lot of stuff that we just got to the point, and then all of a sudden a new camera came out, and it's like I'm not going to spend another $5,000 on a new camera.
Yeah.
So, but the technology is amazing, and I think especially now it's they with the limited way to show houses with this pandemic. If you don't have a Matterport, you're already behind on the, you know, on that property, because there's so many people that can access it, and they don't need to actually go to the house. They can just screen them out themselves.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, we find that a lot of potential residents, we try to get one on every single property, and if we don't have one, sometimes people will ask for one because some people just aren't comfortable going to see it, and but some people, whether you're comfortable or not, just the ability to not have to drive, and it takes now, it takes you 30 to 45 minutes just to do anything in driving if you're gonna go even, you know to the next city over. So it just saves people that time. So yeah, our thing is like, yeah, check out the 360 tour. And then if you like what you see, we still want you to go see it in person. So then go on your own time, get self-verified through our self-showing, go see it. And then we try to make that process really easy for people. So yeah, we
Yeah,
think
I
it
was
works
lucky.
well.
Yeah, I loved it. We actually, I think the place I looked at, well, I'm actually own it now, but I looked at it and it was vacant. So I was able to go over there a couple times. I think I went over because there's like a time frame, I guess, that you can have it open with that code. And
Yeah.
so, within a few days, I was thinking, oh, that's the place. And so I put in the application, and it was, approved pretty quickly. So
Yeah. With just curious, like for the inspection. So like, what was the thought? Like you do like a tour with the inspection and kind of save that for people to view down the line, or if there's a
no, we were just
problem.
as like a
Oh,
separate service. We
oh,
were going
okay.
to open like a Matterport. Okay, we can do home inspections, we can do mold inspections. We just bought a Matterport camera, so if you want us to go and take the photos for you. I know in some markets in different parts of the country, home inspectors will do those signs. They've got a sign business where they can actually, you can order your listing sign that you're going to put out in the yard, and the home inspector will drive out, put the sign up, and there's a charge for that. So we were looking at it as like an auxiliary service, which we did quite a few of them, enough to make our money back on the camera. But it just got to the point where, when we were busy, we just didn't have the time to do them. And push comes to shove, our main core business is home inspections.
Yeah, they are pretty time consuming. And Scott, sorry, I know you're asking the questions, but I did have a question since you mentioned
Yes.
mold inspection. So I went to your website and saw that you guys not only did like your traditional home inspection, but you also do like mold inspections. Is that I mean, I'm not involved with a lot of home inspectors, but that I don't recall seeing a lot of home inspectors doing mold inspections. Is that something that's new for your industry or for what you guys are doing? Or
I don't think it's new. It's actually become really popular in the last 2 or 3 years. There's several that still don't even want to touch it because, one, they haven't received the training or looked into it. They just want to stick with home inspection. Usually those guys are some of your old school, they don't want to do anything else but home inspections.
yeah,
But they with this market, I think what happened was when the market took the downturn in 2008, home inspectors needed to diversify. So they couldn't just rely on home inspections. They needed to get into other auxiliary services to offset if there's ever a crash in the market. So now you're seeing home inspectors that are able to do sewer scope inspections. You can do mold inspections. We can actually do methamphetamine testing. We can do radon testing. So there's a whole bunch of different services that we can offer. So our company, what we've done is we started out with home inspections, but we've just now broken it out into 3 divisions to where we have the home inspection division, we have a commercial property inspection division, and then we have like what we call an environmental division where we can do those mold testing. We can do the radon and the sewer and all the other inspections as well. So
yeah, we'll have to check you out for some of those mold inspections. We do a number of those things. People, there's a leak that we realize has been there for a long time, and we're like, oh shoot, a resident will have lived there for a while and they didn't notice it, or when we've walked through the property that it didn't pop up. So
I've seen it on both ends. I've seen it to where the tenant is at fault, but yet they're trying to blame it on the, either property manager or the owner, because like you
Yeah.
said, there was a leak and they just didn't say anything. And it's been that way for 10 years or 5 years, or, I mean, sometimes I see these leaks. I'm like, how long has it been that way? And
Yeah.
it's leaked through all 3 floors. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I got mold. It's like, well, that's because of you. Or they don't clean the windows, the blinds, you have the mold around the windows. So we see it all. But then at the same time, we get into there where those type of tenants are like looking to break their lease, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But we also get into homes where the tenants are like, I've got mold. I can't get my landlord to do anything about it. And they're beating around the bush. We did one the other day where we went out to the property, and it's like basically on the right-hand side of the whole apartment was mold from about 3 feet up, all the way from the living room, kitchen, and back to the bathroom. And it was because the sprinklers on the outside of that wall just had been hitting the side of the house all those years.
Yeah.
And the landlord just get some Clorox and chlorine and clean it up. It's like, no, you can't do that.
Yeah.
You have to
I
mean, yeah. So we see it on both sides. It's kind of like, I don't want to say we get in the middle of it, but whoever hires us, that's who gets the information. We try to, keep it from, we're not trying to keep it from the tenant or keep it from the landlord, but whoever hires us, that's the one that's going to get the report. If they have any questions, they need to go to that person. So it's kind of one of those type of deals. So, but yeah, that's the division that I'd really like to see grow, because you can get into, we just do the testing. We don't do the remediation. So we're like kind of a third party. So, and then you get into some of these companies that are doing the remediation, they also need what's called a clearance test. And those are the easiest ones, because then you just go out and just basically sign off, before they put everything back together and say, okay, we need a clearance test, get the information to the lab and get it back to us so we can put everything back together. So we do those as well. So.
Yeah, we're familiar with all of that.
I'm sure you are.
Yeah.
It's probably a big headache, that mold.
Yeah, and I am blown away at some property owners. Like, there's some property owners who, are responsible, and they're like, oh, there's mold. Like, okay, yeah, let's take care of it. And there's other property owners who are like, oh, well, it's just a little mold. Well, like, it always just starts with a little, like, it's never turned out well. Like,
you don't want to mess with it. You just get it taken care of and just be done with it. So
it just grows. So, yeah.
So back to you guys, on the website. So I see discover our services. So I don't know how you want to go through this, but I just want to, go through your services, what sets you guys apart. So I'm looking at property, marketing, tenant screening, maintenance, rent collection. You want to go through that, some of those processes, and then I can ask you some questions.
Yeah, of course. What I always tell people is, one property management company to the other, right? It's property management we're all doing the same things, right? So we are finding tenants. That's the main thing. A lot of our, property owners or clients that come to us, they have a rental home, whether they're intentional investors who purchase that as an investment, or what I call the accidental landlords who are like, hey, I ended up with this, I inherited it, or I had to move to Florida and I don't want to sell my California real estate or whatever. So they, somehow, one way or another, our customer has a need for property management. Of course, they don't want to do it themselves. It's a nightmare to do it yourself. So they turn it over to us. So the first thing is find a tenant. So we put the property on the market, do all the marketing. We already talked a little bit about, how we show them and our marketing tours and all that, which is all pretty cool. We also help the property owners get the properties rent ready as well. So as you can imagine, some people are very busy and they have this property. They don't have time to kind of oversee some of the minor repairs to get it in a serviceable spot. So we arrange all that maintenance for them if they need some paint, some carpet, or maybe they need nothing at all, or just a cleaning or whatever. So our team will arrange all that rent ready stuff for them. And then we do all the showings. And then obviously the screening of the tenant is extremely important, especially in the environment that we're in now, where evictions are, not, basically impossible to do an eviction until end of June of this year, 2021. So getting the right qualified tenant is like really key right
So
now.
with that screening, because I know that there might be a lot of questions on that.
Yeah.
Is there? I'm assuming you guys have like a background check system that you're checking, because it seemed like when I went through your process, it was relatively quick. So I'm assuming you get the information back and then you discuss it with the landlord and feed it to them. Like how do you decide? Okay, we get 20 applications and I'm going to send 10 to the homeowner.
Yeah, that's a really good question. You know, it's especially important to do it correctly because, you know, accepting applications is directly tied to fair housing laws. Or and the federal fair housing laws they're pretty strict, surprisingly, and they're out there digging around. And I have a friend, he's not a property management company, but he's a guy who owns some real estate and manages them himself. Actually, my brother-in-law, and he made some mistakes in his screening process and application process. And now he has this big, um, what do you call it? It's an open case with the fair housing, federal fair housing. And it's like this nightmare, you know? But to answer your question, yeah. So how we do it is we're supposed to set a guideline of what's an acceptable tenant for a property. And then any tenant that comes in the door, or I should say prospect, really. So any prospective tenant or prospective resident that that fills out an application, if they
And
pass that bar or test, then there's no reason why you should deny them, right? But if they don't pass it, then they become what we call deniable. So then the question becomes, well, what is your bar? What's the standard? What should that be? So our company standard, it's been kind of tweaked over time. We've been doing this 13 years now. We have a really good idea of what makes a good tenant on paper. So we look at the first thing and the most reliable piece of information that is going to tell you something about your tenant is their income. And so you can't you can't like deny an application on the type of job that somebody has necessarily, but you can based on how much money they make. So we want to see an applicant that their gross monthly income is at least 3 times the rent. And that will actually do a pretty good job of weeding out people that are unable to pay. And that's the biggest indicator, Scott. Like if they can show that, there's a pretty good chance that they're going to meet their obligation.
well, I
Yeah.
remember when I went through the process, because I was, back in the day, I was stated income. I'm
Mhm.
since now, I'm on, I've put myself on salary, but I think when I was going through that process, so I was having to say, okay, here's my bank statements. Here you go. This is what I'm making. And it usually wasn't an issue because, they could see all the deposits that were coming in. But I remember when I relocated down here, because I went to school at the University of Utah and lived up there and had this business for about 10 years. And I
Yeah.
remember when we relocated down here, and I'm thinking, how much is rent? It's like, how much do I have to show? It's like, that's, to me, it was just crazy, because if you wanted to rent a $2,500 place, you basically had to show what, 7,500, or
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it was crazy. Like most people don't make that kind of money. So
Yeah.
it was shocking at first, but now it's just like, yeah, it
Yeah.
is what it is if you want to live
That
in
is
Southern California.
that is what it is. So that's our recommendation. So if you don't make 3 times the rent, then you're what we would call deniable. It means that we would be able to deny you. But if we're not getting enough applicants in and we feel like, hey, this thing's been on the market long enough and we find a situation that we feel is stable, then the property owner can make an exception and say, okay, we're going to go ahead and accept this because we think we just can't get anybody who are meeting that criteria. But most of the tenants that we put in our properties do meet that criteria. So after the next criteria after income is credit. So we like to see a credit score of 640 and above. And then we like to see a 2-year job history as well. So yeah, like you said, proving income, it's not as easy as like, well, yeah, here's how much money I make. You got to prove it. So if you're self-employed, you can look at 1040s from your tax returns. Um, even sometimes then 1040s aren't exactly telling. So if you have to get into nuts and bolts, then we got to go down and look at deposits on bank statements. And
So I'm going to throw a curveball at you.
yeah.
What happens if you have a tenant that is in the marijuana business,
Oh man, that's a good
and
question.
and they've got all this cash, but they don't have any way to show any deposits? Because we did an inspection. I won't say which city on the beach, but we went out to do it was actually a mold inspection, and when we were in the garage, we see these bill counters, and and like not just one, it was a pretty big one. And I'm like, I'm kind of, I'm on, something's going on here. And then when the guy went to go pay us, he goes, "I'll be right back." And he came back with all this cash that he gave us. And then he told us, he goes, "Well, I'm in the, in the marijuana business." And I'm thinking, it's not the first time that I've run across that.
Yeah.
I've been in several houses where those people have it. And so how would they, I mean, I'm assuming, I don't know if he had bought in that place. I'm guessing it might've been a rental. So how would they rent something if they can't show anything? They just come in and just plop down a bunch of cash?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good question. So in that situation, they, first of all, as long as they're not, growing the marijuana for business purposes in the unit, that type of job, it wouldn't preclude them from qualifying because they're in that business, right? Like as long as that business is being done outside of the home, because you can't do any, there's limited amounts of business that you can actually do inside the home legally, right? And that is one that you can't do from inside your home. But if that's their job and they just that happens to be their job and they deal all in cash, and unfortunately they would have a hard time proving their income unless they were able to take that cash, deposit into a bank, and show bank statements. So yeah, we would, any type of just show of cash, we're not like, "Hey, open a big bag and show us, let us see that money," because we don't know if that's really theirs or whatever the case is.
Yeah.
So
I'm always curious.
they'd have a hard time. Yeah. I mean, especially, if they're just staying with their cash and, not filing tax returns. And as I suspect they probably wouldn't be if they just dealing in 100% cash, then
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
that would be a real tough one for them for sure.
yeah, I'm sure you guys will come across it eventually.
Yeah.
So with that, go into the maintenance. So when I was with you guys, the maintenance was pretty easy. We just basically went online, put in the request for maintenance, and somebody was sent out. So kind of tell us a little bit about that process with you guys.
Yeah. For the property owner, the maintenance part and the maintenance pieces can be pretty stressful if you're trying to do it on your own, because calls can come in at any time for an emergency type item. And then plus finding the right vendors can be tricky, especially now. I mean, you've probably noticed, Scott, just like in the last 5 years, finding the availability of skilled labor in Southern California has been completely squeezed. Not a ton of skilled labor here anymore. So not a lot of great vendors to choose from. And even when you do,
What do you think happened? What do you think the reason why?
man, it's a good question. I have some suspicions, but because I'll just quick side note, we also have an in-house maintenance company. So firsthand, we hire maintenance professionals for our maintenance company, and so just we've noticed in the last 5 years, it's really tough to find qualified maintenance providers, and that's been a challenge. So that's just my experience. But I think personally, I think that might be that way is because people, kids growing up don't see it maybe as like a viable career,
Yeah, they don't want to be on the apple farm anymore.
Yeah.
For example.
But I think it's odd. Like, I mean, I have some close relationships with some of our subcontractors, and I'll tell you, if there's any young, kids that are thinking about a career in X or Y, like, hey, consider being a plumber, electrician. You're going to make a good living.
That's what I tell people. I said, don't go to college, go to a trade school, because
sure.
they're going to, and start your own business, because you're going to make a lot of money. So yeah. We did this inspection once up in Palm Springs. We don't go up there very often, but we had a request for it. And the guy that was selling the property owned a home in I want to say Costa Mesa or Newport Beach. And he had this huge home he was selling. And guess what he did? Garage door openers.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
could seriously start a garage door opening business, pound away at reviews, get a bunch of reviews, and boom, you're on your way to having a successful business because everything's based off of reviews nowadays. That's the first thing people are looking at. And you could be a brand new company. And if you're out, if your reviews are more than somebody else, they're going to call you.
For sure.
That's just how it is. So.
Yeah, that's good advice for sure.
So the next one would be, I'm just kind of going into these things, rent collection.
Yeah.
I know on the rent collection, there's different, maybe there's new ways since I did it. I remember you could either set up your check account. You could get your, set it up that
Yeah.
way. You could bring in a check. I don't know if you can I don't know if you can do credit cards.
Yeah, good question. So rent collection, pretty simple part of the business for us. And most of our residents will pay online through the portal, through an online portal that we have set up. That's nothing special about our company. A lot of companies will offer that. A cool thing though that we do offer, because we do have some residents that are we call them cash payers, even though we don't accept cash here at the office. So a lot of residents are cash payers, right? For some reason, they just love to pay their rent in cash. They want to drive to the office. They want to hand it to you. We don't really like that. We don't like dealing in cash. We say, take your cash, purchase a cashier's check. And they're like, well, we don't have a bank account. So I take my cash and I go and I purchase a money order. You can go to 7-Eleven or MoneyGram or anything. And
Postal service.
Postal service. Yeah. But let's think of the hassle. You got to take your cash, you go to the post office, you got to pay the fees, and you got to drive over to my office. It's like a half a day affair for people that want to pay their rent in cash. So some people are passionate about that. So we have this system where a tenant can take their cash and they can just walk into some of our participating locations, and such as like Walgreens and 7-Eleven. 7-Eleven is the big one. So they just pay their cash directly to 7-Eleven with this barcode. We print out a barcode on a piece of paper for them, and they just keep it in their car. Then they go to 7-Eleven, like that's across the street from their house, instead of driving over to a couple miles to where we are. And then they pay 7-Eleven, use their barcode, and then it automatically updates our system, and we get the money the next day. So that's pretty cool. We think that's pretty neat.
Nice.
System.
Yeah, I know that my company, I don't even have a physical bank. My bank is a digital federal credit union. It's based in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And so there's not a physical bank. I mean, I guess if I needed to go to credit union, I can go to the credit union, but sometimes people will pay us in cash and I don't have a way to deposit that cash. So what I've had to do is I'm at the post office all the time because we mail out our samples. So I'll just sometimes, if I get too much in the safe, I'll put it in a money order and then deposit it that way. So it's kind of outdated, but I haven't been in a bank for so long because everything's done online nowadays. I deposit our checks online. Everything's done that way. So there's a few times that we do get cash. I do go through that process, but it usually doesn't take that much because I'll go early in the morning and nobody's in line, and I'll just get a couple of $1,000 money orders and then deposit them electronically. So
yeah,
7-Eleven, I'll have to look at that.
Yeah, could you imagine like if we took cash, like because rent's so expensive, you're like, just if you have like 100 people pay $2,000 in cash, well, that's a lot of money floating around here. So we don't deal in that at all,
Yeah, we don't. We have certain buyers that always pay cash, and I can almost see it coming when I see them. There is such a thing as stereotyping, and sometimes they just always pay cash. So that's just how it is. So
yeah.
Next one would be, and I'm glad that you decided to come on here because I'm pretty familiar with your company already because I went through these processes. So property inspections, I'm assuming that's to verify that the property's in good shape. Sometimes on our end as home inspectors, we get people that will buy properties and they're going to rent them out. Or they're going to try to do the property management themselves. If they're trying to do the property management themselves, I always tell them, you need to check on your property on a regular basis. And I always tell them, I say the best way to do that without being intrusive is to tell them that you need to change out the air filter every few months.
For sure.
And I tell them, I said, that's a good way to get in and get a good glimpse of the property. Otherwise, you'll never get in there. and they're
Yeah.
always going to be suspicious. And so that's what I always tell people that are going to buy a property and try to manage it themselves. And I tell them, I said, you have to get in here and check these properties, because from our experience, we always see leaks that they just don't get, they just don't get reported to the landlord, because then they got to go, oh, I got to clean my place up. I don't want the landlord in here. They just rather let it leak, and there's a bucket underneath the sink. So how do you guys handle the property inspections?
Yeah, no, that's funny that you mentioned all that. But yeah, so we call them inspections, Scott, but it's not, of course, it's not an inspection like like you guys would do, right? Our property inspections are done by a licensed inspector. It's a different, you're getting a different product, obviously, with what you would provide as a home inspection as to what we provide for our, what we call our property inspection, right? So our property inspection is every 6 months we go inside the property and we do a pretty quick review. And a lot of that is just talking to the resident, and where we get a lot of information, because a lot of residents, there'll be a problem, but they just won't mention it, or or they won't see it. So we can go in, we go through, we look through the property, we look under the sinks, we look for leaks, and then we talk to the resident. They give us some information about what's been happening. We ask a few targeted questions about how certain things are working in the home to make sure that things are going well. But it's dead on what you said about if you're gonna have a hard time getting the property. I can tell you got some experience there, because yeah, that's the way that we get in to do our inspections. Is we say, hey, we're going to go and we're going to change the air filter. So we go in and we change the air filter in the property. And then while we're there, we do an inspection. And I think it's interesting too, because some newer property owners, they maybe not have a lot of experience dealing with a resident. They'll buy a property and they'll be like, well, it's my property. I can go in anytime I want to. It's like, well, yes and no. Yes, it's your property. Can you go in every time you want to? No, because you don't have possession of the property anymore. And they have a lease saying that they have possession. And they're like, well, we can give notice to enter, right? Yes, you can give notice to enter, but you have to do it properly. There's some guidelines on how to do that. But I think most importantly is there's a little thing like I think that property owners sometimes forget is customer service to your resident. I think you got to look in terms of say, listen, this tenant who's living in this property, they're not just this person that's living in my property and paying my rent. This is my customer. Like, they're paying the mortgage or a piece of the mortgage. I need to treat this person like a customer, and it's a different mentality. And in the second a property owner starts treating their resident like a customer, things get better for everybody, right?
Yeah.
So when you have a customer living in your property, if you're banging on their door every month and say, let me go in, that's not good customer service.
No, they're they're gonna be leaving in the middle of the night.
Yeah. So anyway, we do inspections every 6 months. We take photos of the property. We send it to our client. That way they can get a feel, like say, hey, here's what it looks like inside. And they feel a little more comfortable with the situation.
Yeah. All right, then the next one be financial reporting. So I'm assuming that's just reports that
Yeah.
the landlords
Our
can go in and
statement.
look at.
Yeah. We provide them with all the statements that they need. We help if a lot of times our clients' tax professionals will have some questions. And so we can interact with their tax professionals and give them some information. I guess the financial reporting, that's near and dear to my heart. That's where I actually started my career, working for a CPA firm. And so getting all that correct and making sure the financial information is accurate and quick is pretty important to us here.
Good.
Yeah.
Next one, I think will probably be on for a while, and evictions.
Oh,
so
man. Yeah.
You mentioned it earlier about with this pandemic. I'm always curious because you see it on the news. You see it where they're, halting evictions, or they're, what's the deadline now? September that they're proposing. How does the landlord? One, you understand the reason why. I mean, no, if people are out of work, that's no fault of their own, because nobody knew that this was going to happen. I mean, even people that have the required, 6 months savings, that they tell you to have. I mean,
Mhm.
that was long gone 4 or 5 months ago, if you had that, and if you're still out of work. Luckily, my business, we've been, gangbusters since, I think, about 2 months. We were probably slow, when this pandemic all hit, because nobody knew what was going on. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden, bam, the market just took off, and we've just been nonstop busy since then, because people are moving. They want to get into a bigger house, they want a backyard because they don't want to be in a condo anymore. But these landlords that have these properties that, they're not getting paid on, how are they able to keep these properties?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's kind of a lot to talk about here, but I know right when the pandemic hit, a lot of landlords were pretty concerned about whether or not they were going to get their rent and how that was going to work out. You know, from where we are now in February 2021, it's turned out, at least for the properties that we manage in Orange County, it's been great. We have had a significantly higher amount of default in rent, but not uh, as big as it could have been, or not as impactful as I thought it would be. Um, so we manage about 800 properties. Most of them are homes and condos, and out of those 800 properties, we've had 40 that have had some difficulty, which is up, quite a bit, to what we normally experience. But out of those 40, our approach was, you know, uh, the property management industry kind of got together, and we all kind of, we all know each other, and we said, okay, what are we going to do? Like, if you can't evict people, how do we handle this? And so our industry as a whole, I kind of taken this and done the same thing. We've just said, hey, we're going to try to work out payment plans with residents that are struggling. So step one, if a resident is struggling, like, I understand, like, it's not some of this stuff, it's not their fault. Like, they're in an industry that got impacted.
They've
That's
probably been paying their rent on time
Yeah.
since the beginning, and then all of a sudden, bam, they just lost their job.
Yeah. It just has nothing to do with them. It's the industry that they were in. So yeah, hey, you know what? I'm unable to pay my rent payment. So we say, okay, well, let's investigate. And then we have a process where they kind of show us what the impact of the pandemic was upon their job. And then we work out a lower payment for them for a certain time period. And we've had a lot of success with people meeting their obligations with some of these payment plans. And then even people that have caught up. So we've had people that we've lowered, let's say that we knock $500 off their rent, and then for 5 months. So now they have kind of back rent owed, if you will, of $2,500. And we've had tenants that have come back and paid that. So been pretty surprised at how well our payment plans have worked. And then we've had a few situations where there's just they can't pay their rent and they haven't been able to come back. And in those situations, it's really unfortunate for the property owner, because the property owner doesn't have any recourse. So normally a property owner could do an unlawful detainer action, which is just the legal name for an eviction, right? So we would do our eviction or unlawful detainer, and we would get that tenant out of the property and replace them with a paying tenant. But right now, there's a couple federal and mostly state laws that have put those on ice. So right now, you can't really complete an eviction, and there's a lot of like fine lines and grays and little things in there that I'm happy to talk about. But basically, you can't do an eviction until June 30th, 2021. And it's probably going to get pushed out, is what we're thinking, until the end of the year. So
Yeah.
those landlords who have a tenant that is unpaying, we can evict them. So the best course of action for those property owners to go back to their lender and trying to get some type of leniency from their lender. And if their loan is a government loan, or a Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae loan, then they actually can get some forgiveness on their payment. And I actually believe it's not forgiveness. What's happening is that their payments are being restructured. And so they're not paying payments for a certain amount of time. And those payments are getting added onto the back of the loan. But every lender is doing something a little bit differently. Some lenders aren't doing anything, and that property owner is going to probably have to foreclose on the home. But foreclosures are also at a stop. So uh, the bank are going to be left empty-handed as well when they try to foreclose. So
Yeah, I've
yeah.
noticed that because we do property inspections on multifamily, not my favorite to do because, we get into a unit that's 10 units and it's like you got to deal with 10 different tenants. We had one in Anaheim, or maybe it was Orange, where it was scheduled to go out and do the inspection. And about 3 days before, the buyer goes or sends us an email and says, "Oh, we've got 3 tenants in there that's got COVID and we need to reschedule." I'm like, "Nope, no problem. We're not going to go in there." And but we have seen an uptick on multi-unit inspections, and I'm just curious. Maybe that's why. Maybe these tenant or these landlords are just, I got to sell it. I got to get rid of it because I'm not able to, make my payments because the tenants aren't paying me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility. If the lender isn't giving them any type of leniency, and they don't, what choice do they have? They have to sell it, or
yeah.
yeah.
So the last one would be my reason alone, if I was a landlord to hire a property management company, would be the legal guidance of not having to deal with all that stuff with the evictions. So I'm assuming you guys handle all that kind of stuff, or does the landlord have to be involved at some point?
No, we do it all. We show up to court and everything's for an eviction, and yeah, we handle that whole thing. Um, yeah, I think that's a big pain point for landlords, like the fear of having to do an eviction. I think the reality, Scott, is that there's not like a lot. We don't do a ton of evictions. Most people pay their rent, but I think like most of the legal complexity isn't necessarily with the eviction that landlords need to worry about. Most of the complexity and the issues that landlords run into is just how they treat the tenant, um, like fair housing laws, habitability laws, or when most of our clients get into trouble with, not fixing things that they thought they didn't need to fix, and turns out the city will nail you pretty hard if you don't fix that item. And how to handle unique situations like we talked about with mold. Like, how do you handle that correctly and avoid a lawsuit at all costs? Because my experience is any type of loss, if you're a landlord and you get into a lawsuit, I don't care if you're right, you're wrong, you're wrong. You're always
Yeah.
wrong
Yeah.
because you never win. I've never seen a landlord really win against a tenant, even for the most like very clearly situations where the landlord is right. You're still wrong. So that's why I tell landlords, you're wrong no matter what in California. Sorry.
Yeah, I've been doing this long enough where I'm thinking, I don't know if I could be a landlord from the stuff that I see out there. Maybe Airbnb, I could handle that, but those are all changing as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, and just the recent new passing of just, put into law this year is the AB 1482, which is rent control through California. So the new rent control laws are pretty complex, and how do you apply them, and when you can have a tenant move out of a property, and paying for moving expenses under certain situations. And yeah, there's a lot kind of involved there, which I wouldn't want to be. So I'd say for us landlords, hey, it's not good. But for property management companies, the complexity of it actually gives us value.
Oh,
So I
yeah.
hate to say that, like, but it's true. Like, we understand how to navigate it. And so I don't see I don't see California backing off anytime soon on how much they're going to put on landlords and the rules, and how I think it's just going to get worse personally. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
So, I mean, I think we got a good idea of your company. Couple questions personally. What are your hobbies? Like, what do you like to do when you're out of work?
Yeah, that's a good question, man. So I'm married. I have 3 daughters, 1 and 13. She just turned 13. I guess that sounds weird. I have a teenager at home now. I don't feel that old.
Oh, your troubles are just beginning.
Yeah. And then I have a 9-year-old and then a 3-year-old. And then so that surprisingly, I call it my second job. So when I leave work, I said, oh, guess I got to go to my other job at home. No, I love the kids and the family. So there's that. But for hobbies, both. So the company's owned by myself and the other co-owners named Bryant, and him and I over the last 13 years, we've become like really good friends because we sit next to each other and we work through all this stuff together. So we both enjoy surfing. So we're big surfers. We like to surf a lot. And then during the winter, we love to go snowboarding, and my kids ski. So we do that. And then just recently during the pandemic, though, I have a friend who got me into dirt bike riding. And so I had never thought I would do something like that because it seemed like way too dangerous. But I feel like he talked me into it. And so I've been kind of making my way through that and trying not to get hurt. So that's my newest fun thing that I've been playing with lately.
Yeah, when you mentioned snowboarding, last week we flew into Jackson Hole,
Yeah.
and we'd had it planned for about a month. And I just kept looking at the snow reports, and I'm like, "There's no snow. There's no snow. The mountains just weren't getting snow."
Yeah.
So on Thursday, when we flew in, I took a direct flight from LAX into Jackson. We got all the way to Jackson. They turned us around, diverged to Salt Lake because of the storm that hit. They
Yeah.
got a foot of snow, but yet we couldn't get there because the airport was closed, because Jackson, they're, during the wintertime, they've got those big jumbo jets that are coming in there, and that airport's small. You get any kind of snow on that airport and they don't have enough room to stop.
Oh,
They'll just skid right off. And
yeah.
so diverted us back to Salt Lake for 6 hours, and then they reattempted it. And so I did get in, but it was worth it because of the foot of snow that we had, and it
Oh,
was a great time. So we got in Thursday night and then came back on Sunday. So it was a good trip. So if you haven't gone up there yet, highly recommend it for snowboarding. It's a quick flight too. It's not that far. So
yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, we have the icon passes, so we can get in there with our icon pass. And I've been wanting to go, but it just seems so far. I've been a little like,
it's not that bad. Direct flight.
really?
It was in and out. So it was pretty. On the
Yeah,
way back, I did connect through Salt Lake, which took a little bit longer, but it was fine. So the other question that I've been asking everybody right now is, what during the pandemic, everybody had something that they were going to start or they were going to learn. Is there anything that you wanted to do or wanted to learn that you never did do it? So for
yeah.
example, me, I wanted to learn Spanish. I still haven't learned it.
Yes.
You're thinking you're going to have all this time. And I think if we
Yeah.
weren't working every day like we, have been, I probably would have had more time for it. But, those first 2 months, I'm like, I'm going to learn Spanish. I got the Duolingo app out. I'm ready to go. And it still hasn't happened yet. So is there anything that you had planned on doing?
Yeah, it's funny. I had taken an interest in investing and trading stocks, and so I'm the worst at it, and so because I was just doing it casually, and I was like, well, now I have some time to really figure this out, and you look at the news. Some of these guys are making all this money and blah blah blah, and so. Yeah, it turned out that it's probably not the best idea because I'm not very good at it and don't
Stay
really
away from Robinhood.
yeah. So
It was interesting. Is there a podcast that you listen to that you like that you can refer somebody to? Because that's been something, you get that question a lot where somebody says, what's a good book that you've read? My question is have you found a good podcast that you like to listen to?
yeah, that's a good question. So I used to listen to a lot of podcasts, and very common. A lot of people like This American Life. That's a pretty good one for entertainment. And then I liked Tim Ferriss's podcast. I thought that one was pretty cool. But I've been mostly into audiobooks lately.
Yeah.
So you can find me mostly plugging into an audiobook and trying to get entertained that way. Just in the last couple of months.
Yeah, I do. Two of the ones that I like are one's Market Watch. It's an NPR one.
Okay.
And then there's one that's called Planet Money, and it's
Oh.
an NPR one as well. And I think the last one that they did, it was on that Robinhood,
Oh, really?
kind of explain that whole process, because you hear it in the news. I really haven't been paying much attention to the news. It's a lot quieter now that we have a new leader in the country. It's not so in your face all the time. So it's been nice for that.
Yeah.
But there was one that was a while ago back during Christmas, because Christmas trees, I don't know if you remember, but Christmas trees were so expensive this year.
Yeah.
And they actually delved into the reason why Christmas trees were so expensive. And you would never have known unless this podcast, and it's actually a really good one. So check it out. It's called
I
Planet
will.
Money. And then there's one that's called Market Watch. And they're both done by NPR, and they're half hours. So they're pretty good ones. But the one that they did on the Robinhood that I listened to this morning was pretty good, because they actually used the app, bought some stock, and then they explained how that process works, where Robinhood doesn't charge any money. So if they don't charge any money, how are they getting paid? And how they got paid, and the
Yeah.
delay in the transaction is what caused all these issues that are happening with the
Yeah.
Gamecast or whatever that.
And they do like this, don't they do, doesn't Robinhood do like the stocks, the share splitting or something like that too? I
Something
don't
what
know.
they do is, from what they were just explaining, was that when you put in a stock, when you buy a stock, it's actually, you're not actually purchasing it for 2 days. There's that 2 day lag
Huh.
of when you've purchased it to where you actually own it. And so there's something that broke down in between those, where you had all these Reddit users that were buying all this stock, but there was such a delay that it wasn't real time stock trading.
Interesting.
So
Yeah.
yeah, if you go to Planet Money and look at the
I'm gonna have
Robinhood
to go
one,
read. I'm gonna have
yeah,
to check
yeah,
that one
it's
out.
so it's they. I mean, it's not just about money. It's just, like I said, they did that one on Robinhood. They did the one on Christmas trees, where they actually, these two guys, they went in there, and Christmas trees are bought and sold just like cattle. You go to a big, all these guys that have these Christmas tree lots around the neighborhood,
Yeah.
they actually go and buy those like they're buying cattle. They go to a big Christmas tree farm, and there's like big bundles of Christmas tree, and they're checking them out, looking at them, and the values of the piles are different prices, and they showed that whole process on how Christmas trees are bought and sold, just like anything else. It's just like a commodity. So
Yeah.
pretty
Interesting.
interesting. So it's a good podcast. So all right, I think that would be the end of it. I think we ran just a little bit long, but I just wanted to appreciate you coming on and giving us some good insight on property management. I think this would be some useful information for homeowners, landlords, realtors that you're probably working with. I'm sure that you guys have to be licensed realtors, right?
Oh
To
yeah.
be able to do
Definitely.
this stuff.
Yep.
So anybody that's out there that is looking for some property management, give Kyle a call over at True Property Management. Do you have you want to go over your website, your phone number, and your social media that you're on?
Sure.
Before
Yeah.
we go?
Yeah. Check us out at our website, TrueDoorPM.com. Phone number 714-899-2200. And you just search TrueDoor Property Management on Facebook. You can see our Facebook page there and able to check out. We post mostly vacant properties that are up for rent and get a feel for what we have out there.
All right. Well, appreciate it. Well,
Yeah.
thanks
Thanks,
everybody for
John.
joining. We can stop the call now.
All right.
Thanks.